The early morning light filtered through the window, casting a pale glow on the living room where Billy sat, eyes fixed on the empty wheelchair. It was a sight that had become all too familiar during Paul's last days, but now the absence of his partner weighed even heavier. The silence in the room was deafening, and the grief within him felt like a never-ending spiral. Billy had lost Paul, and now the reality that life must continue without him began to sink in. He clenched his fists, struggling to hold back the tears. The house felt unbearably quiet without Paul's presence, and every little corner reminded him of the memories they shared. The family gathered later that morning to discuss funeral arrangements. The atmosphere was tense, emotions running high as each person dealt with their grief in their own way. Some sat quietly, lost in thought, while others bickered over minor details. Eileen and Todd clashed over the logistics, while Gemma was uncharacteristically silent, too heartbroken to engage in the disagreements. It seemed impossible to focus on the practicalities of planning Paul's farewell when the pain of his absence was still so fresh. "Can we just focus on what Paul would have wanted?" Billy finally interjected, his voice cracking. "He deserves to be remembered with love, not arguments." As they tried to pull themselves together, hoping to find common ground, elsewhere in Weatherfield, another family was going through their own emotional turmoil. Tyrone stood in the living room, watching Hope and Ruby as they laughed and played with little Doran. It should have been a happy moment, but there was a knot in his stomach that wouldn't go away. The girls had no idea that this might be the last time they'd see their little brother. Alima had already confirmed they were leaving for Romania the next day, and Tyrone was devastated. He hadn't been able to change her mind, and now the thought of his son being taken away filled him with dread. "I'll call them in," he muttered, heading for the back door. But when he stepped outside, panic gripped him. The yard was empty. "Hope, Ruby, Doran," Tyrone shouted, his voice trembling as he frantically searched the area. His heart raced as the seconds ticked by with no sign of the children. Where could they have gone? Meanwhile, across town, Dee Dee had her own problems. Lissa had approached her with some concerning information about Joel, whose phone showed suspicious text messages exchanged with a woman named Ellie. Lissa wasn't about to let it go, and neither was Craig, who agreed to help track down Ellie, but with a warning. If word got out, both could lose their jobs. Craig eventually found Ellie's address, but as they knocked on the door, they were left wondering whether Ellie would be willing to speak. Lisa was determined to get answers, but the risk they were taking loomed large. If they crossed any lines, it could cost them everything. Back at the flat, Leon and Toya sat at the breakfast table, the tension palpable. Sam, sensing the icy atmosphere between them, tried to cut through the silence. "Forget Nick," he said bluntly. "He's not important anymore. Your sisters. Act like it." Just as he finished speaking, the doorbell rang. It was Nick, and he came with news about Rowan. The question lingered. Would it be more bad news? Elsewhere, Tracy handed Amy the phone, playing Tommy's message aloud. In it, he pleaded with Amy to come home, saying how much he missed her. Amy listened quietly, her face a mask of confusion and doubt. Tracy waited anxiously. What would Amy decide? As the day unfolded in Weatherfield, grief, tension, and uncertainty filled the air, leaving each family grappling with the choices that lay ahead.